So, as I said, today, the 2nd of April, three interesting people were born. Charlemagne, or Carol, the great emperor who is considered the father of Europe. And during his time and after him, for a while, architecture flourished. So I will show examples of Carolingian architecture, as it is called. Then I will talk about a great Danish furniture designer, Hans Wegner, the king of chairs, as he was called. And third, I will talk about a very interesting Japanese architect, Kazuo Shinohara. So I'll begin with Charlemagne. Charlemagne, the father of Europe, again, born on this day. We don't have too many portraits of him, but we have examples of the architecture built during his time. So Charles the Great, Charlemagne, from the Latin Carolus Magnus, Charles I was the king of the Franks from 1768, the king of the Lombards from 774, and the emperor of the Romans from 800. During the early Middle Ages, he united the majority of Western and Central Europe. He was the first recognized emperor to rule from Western Europe since the fall of the Western Roman Empire around 3 centuries earlier. The expanded Frankish state that Charlemagne founded is called the Carolingian Empire. He was later canonized by Antipope Paschal III. So this was a very important city during his time, the Carolingian city, famed for its culture and arts. And you'll see a few examples of Carolingian architecture. This is truly, kind of an aide-memoire, with examples of this period in architecture and in history. But these buildings impress me very much because not only that they lasted about 1,200 years, but they are, aesthetically very interesting, engaging, convincing. They even have, I would say, a certain modernity because they are austere. There is an inner monumentality, and you'll see some other examples. This is a gateway from 1768, 1774. So there, 1,200 years more than 1,250 years ago. This was built. Of course, in time there were changes, but there is something coming to us from that time, from the time of Charlemagne, the father of Europe. So it's a massive architecture, but here we also see examples of ornamentation. It's not just, the massive wall. It's also the skin of the wall, which in this case is ornamental. Church of Lord Schleby. So all these are, you already saw a picture of this. It's an impressive building, and you don't need too many so-called details. It's impressive by its age. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. So this is Carolingian architecture from 1,200 years ago, or 1,250 years ago. There are remnants, but some of these so-called remnants are still very impressive. Again, in Lorsch. So, we talk about the Renaissance, we talk about sometimes the Gothic, but there was architecture before these great periods in the human history as well. And yes, we know of ancient Greece, we know of ancient Rome, we know of the Egyptian culture, we know maybe of the Mesopotamian culture, but there is a period that we kind of neglect. And is that period, let's say from the middle of the first millennium to the arrival of the Gothic. People live there, just like we do. They lived, they built, and we are not very concerned with what was happening then. Even with the Middle Ages, we are not so concerned with it in comparison with the Renaissance and the post-Renaissance. And I think it's very important to descend on the spiral of time and realize that we are not, the world didn't start with the Renaissance. There was a lot of activity and a lot of culture and a lot of building before that, even before the invention of the Tsquare. Because from what I read, the Tsquare was invented kind of in the 11th century. Well, you'll see all the buildings that you see now in the Carolingian period, they were built before the arrival of Its Majesty the Tsquare, which we think is the you know, the very root, the you know, the summum, the essence of architecture. Is not. It's really a tool like other tools, and should be regarded as such, not as, you know, being the essential primal tool, because it's not. If indeed the Tsquare came into being in the 11th century, then what about all the architecture before the 11th century? The Greeks didn't have it, the Romans didn't have it, the Egyptians didn't have it, the Mesopotamians didn't have it. You know, I mean, and yet they built, didn't they? And they built brilliantly. So, well, it seems it's not so indispensable, the Tsquare. Of course, I am attacking the obsession that the schools here have with a Tsquare, as if it is, you know, God sent. It's not. It's a tool, it's a useful tool, and there was good architecture done with it, but it's not indispensable. Anyway, so examples of the architecture before the arrival on the scene of the proud and, you know, kind of egocentric Tsquare, which is forcing us to think that only the right angle and the straight lines are worthy of consideration in architecture. And it is not so. Anyway, the problem with the Tsquare is that it condemns you to be the slave, the prisoner of the drafting board. It's, you know, the Tsquare is, with a laptop, you can work on a bench in the park, you can work even on the building site. But with the Tsquare, you are not going to carry with yourself a drafting board. The Tsquare is literally condemning you to be aloof from the building site, from even in a way from life itself, you know, looking there on the drafting board. I love the drafting boards, the wooden ones, and I even love the Tsquares. But I think they can be a little bit questioned if indeed they are so indispensable. Anyway, Carolingian architecture done before the arrival of the Tsquare. And by the way, do you think God used the Tsquare when he built the world? I don't think so. It's also true he didn't use too many right angles and straight lines. Nature doesn't have too many of those. I wonder why. Because God is considered the supreme, you know, the quintessential architect, no? But he didn't use the Tsquare, nor did he use straight lines and right angles. The Palatine Chapel in Aachen. I mean, there are some impressive buildings. You'll see now coming to us from 1,200 years ago. Look at this. You know, I mean, which buildings of ours will last for 1,200 years? I doubt that too many. Although I have to say, in Manhattan, in New York, buildings that are 100 years old still look like as if they were built yesterday or today even. So I don't know. But still, to have something like this from 1,200 years ago is not a little matter. Now, of course, this was not built by Charlemagne, but Charlemagne with his great interest in architecture, generated this, he was the source in a way of all of this. Just as Queen Victoria in a way was, it is assumed that the architecture during her time is considered Victorian architecture. This is considered Carolingian architecture, although the emperor himself was not an architect. But it is important to have a leader with vision and with a power inevitably connected with the function of an emperor to have such an architecture flourish. So the building we just saw is, the plan is on the right. But again, here we see three great buildings that didn't use the drafting board and the Tsquare. And I'm sure they had tools, but of different kinds, maybe even some kind of approximation of the Tsquare. The problem, I mean, I should stop with this thing because I become obsessional. No, because it does irritate me how this so-called ABC of architecture is considered as being just an ABC. It's not actually. The ABC of architecture is to take a branch of a tree, a thin branch of a tree, and draw on sand something while you sit maybe on grass or I don't know, even on a bench. That is the ABC, not the Tsquare. The Tsquare is already a sophisticated, and I would even say maliciously corrupted tool of later developments. Anyway, but they knew geometry. Yes, they knew geometry. I mean, these buildings were not built, through ignorance. No. A building from 1806, Oratory in Germany-des-Prés in France, not bad. It's the real thing. It's not. It's a building. No, that's what we look at a building. Carolingian architecture. So again, the world didn't start with Renaissance, and it didn't even start with the Middle Ages. And it didn't even start with the Carolingian architecture. There is a lot of architecture that is very precious and that preceded much of the architecture that we think is the beginning of it all. It's not. We are not the first humans on Earth, that's for sure. And let's hope we are not going to be the last ones. Completed after 1814, Imperial Palace. There are some just remnants, as you can see, but even as remnants are impressive. Your natural materials like stones, bricks, and so on, they age well. Even if they are just ruins, they are still convincing. And I don't know about more recent materials. I'm not so sure. Our materials, the materials we use now in construction, I'm not sure they age well. It's important, I think, to know it's not just for the sake of history to accumulate data from the past. I think the past, the so-called past, is relevant only in the measure and the extent it didn't actually pass. So there is something present in that so-called past which inspires and helps us move forward. It's about the continuous present, in fact, not about the past, not about the dead, but the living dead in a way, what is living. Well, I look at these fragments of buildings and they inspire me. I feel connected on the spiral of time with Charlemagne, with whoever, and this gives you a desire to continue. You feel less alone in this world. Another monastery. Now, we don't know, I mean, for sure, certain things changed over such a long period of time. But look at this interior. You know, it's not to be neglected. It's not to be wiped out of our memory, because it is impressive. It is built in an impressive way. And, you know, it is structure, but it's also ornament. I mean, these arches and the columns, they also have you know, an interest, so to speak, in aesthetics. They are not just you know, bare structural elements. There is a quest for beauty, and I think it is achieved. Massive walls are impressive. We don't build them like this any longer. As Louis Kahn said, when the wall was thick, the window was a receptacle of light. Was that transitional space between the outside and the inside that found its place in the window, that opening into a thick wall. But the more we progressed in time, the more we became so-called you know, civilized and modern. The wall became thinner and thinner. And now he said, you know, there isn't that interstitial space between the outside and the inside, which was possible when the wall was very thick. So he said, you know, now we have a thin wall and we have the glass of the window, and then we place a curtain above the window. So, you know, things changed, but there is something about the thick wall and the narrow window, which I think is worth reflecting about. It's also interesting, I don't know if you noticed, but Ronchamp, the chapel of Notre Dame du Haut by Le Corbusier, has a modern thin wall, so to speak, with one exception, the curved wall towards south, which is very, very, very thick. And it's kind of strange because it is the wall that is oriented towards south, towards the sun. And yes, it has piercing windows, you know, those small varied windows. But I wonder why Le Corbusier made that wall so thick. And it's a medieval wall in a building which otherwise is thoroughly modern. Very interesting, that wall, the southern wall of Ronchamp. Another building, another monastery in Belgium. Now this was, of course, rejuvenated, refurbished, but there is still something of that time. St. Michael's Fulda Rotonda and Crypt, Carolingian architecture. Thank you, Mr. Carol. I don't think I can address an emperor this way. I probably would have been guillotined on the spot. You know, how do you address an emperor? Emperor Charlemagne, or I don't know. We don't have emperors any longer, but some desire for emperors still exists in the world, and even certain presidents seem to have an attraction towards maybe becoming an emperor of some kind. Austria is interesting in this sense, because Austria had an empire, the last empire in Europe until 1918. And that culture, the Austrian culture, is very interesting. On one hand, you know, very attracted towards modernity, and on the other hand, you know, the empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it was present and perhaps still is in the spirit of the country, and maybe especially in the spirit of Vienna. Anyway, a basilica in Steinbach, 1827. Carolingian architecture. I go a little bit quicker because we have a lot of material to show. After this will come Hans Wegner, and then the great Japanese architect Kazuo Shinohara, the only modern today. No, not really, because Hans Wegner was modern too. So again, Carolingian architecture. Who cares that certain things are ruined? It's fine. You know, beauty is revealed even by ruins. Sometimes even better. Louis Kahn loved ruins. The ruin, he said, that tells you how a building was made. A church in Frankfurt.
Pispos? Pispos, trece aici. Pispos.
Please try and turn
Pispos.
off the microphone. Please turn off the microphone. Thank you. So we move forward. A castle from 1884. Carolingian architecture from 1,200 years ago. Even if only fragments of it exist today, but these fragments are still impressive, I think. The monastery, 1885, you know. I mean, this is a tall building, isn't it? So they built like this in the 8th century, 9th century, you know, it's incredible. But then when you think about the great cathedrals of the Middle Ages, they were not born from nothing. It wasn't a tabula rasa. There was a past for them as well. So the quest for the heights is eternal. Of course, they would not have imagined at that time that humanity will arrive at the capacity, the ability to build 1 kilometer high skyscrapers. St. George, another church from Carol's time or Carolingian times. Charlemagne's time was born today. Charlemagne, the great emperor, the father of Europe, as he was called, was born today, April the 2nd. The Church of Santa Maria del Narronco is a Roman Catholic pre-Romanesque church. By the way, of Roman Catholic, if there is someone of you here, today is Good Friday for the Catholics and for Roman Catholics as well. So this is in Spain. I love this building. You know, let's read again. The Church of Santa Maria del Narronco, St. Mary of Mount Narronco, is a Roman Catholic pre-Romanesque church on the slope of Mount Narronco, only 3 kilometers from Oviedo in Asturias, northern Spain. Look at this, 1,200 years ago. It is impressive. It is beautiful, I think. It has dignity, it has beauty, it resisted, it survived for 1,200 years. Look at the interior. People like us were living then as well. And they built this with stone. Maybe they didn't need handrails. There are no handrails now. Maybe they vanished in time. It's very possible. But I think a stair without handrails is even more powerful aesthetically. And I know the dangers of falling from the stair, but Le Corbusier also had a problem with the handrails. He built a few things where the handrail is actually near the wall, not on the side that could be dangerous, which is kind of strange. Anyway, Spain, Carolingian times, Carolingian architecture, stone stairs, stone walls, stone everything, almost everything, with the exception of the windows. and the arches. Okay, and now, so let's wish happy birthday to Charlemagne, the great emperor who is considered, was considered, and is considered, and will be considered the father of Europe. And now we go to the father of chairs. Well, not really the father of chairs, but the king of chairs. Hans Wegner was considered the king of chairs. Maybe it sounds a little bit funny, but this man was born to design chairs. That's all we can say. Danish, Hans Wegner, a brilliant designer. Denmark has, and the Scandinavians in general, as you know, are quite good at design, the famous Scandinavian design. But there is only one king of the chairs, and that king is Hans Wegner. So, Hans Jorgensen Wegner, born, as you see, April the 2nd, was a Danish furniture designer. His work, along with a concerted effort from several of his manufacturers, contributed to the international popularity of mid-century Danish design. His style is often described as organic functionality, a modernist school with emphasis on functionality. This school of thought arose primarily in Scandinavian countries with contributions by Poul Henningsen, Alvar Aalto, and Arne Jacobsen. Of Alvar Aalto and Arne Jacobsen, we'll talk in detail when their birthdays or the days when they died will happen. Wegner has been referred to as the king of chairs for his proliferated work designing seating. In his lifetime, he designed over 500 different chairs, over 100 of which were put into mass production, and many of which have become recognizable design icons. And now his words: if only you could design just one good chair in your life, but you simply cannot. So in this statement, he shows clearly that he was meant to search all his life for that ideal chair. And this reminds me to go back to the words of Louis Kahn, who asked himself, what does a painter, no, he said, a painter doesn't live because of what he did, but because of what he didn't do yet. In the same way, Wegner didn't live because of all those 500 chairs that he did, but because of what he didn't do yet, because he didn't yet arrive at that one good chair. And Brancusi was the same in his quest for capturing in sculpture the spirit of flight. When he was asked which bird out of the 27 that he sculpted represented his best achievement in this quest, he named two birds. In other words, he didn't yet arrive at that one bird in flight, or golden bird, or whatever he might have called it, that expressed because it was really a longing for the absolute, for the infinite. So in that sense, Wegner didn't achieve it, Brancusi didn't achieve it, and the painter in Kahn's vision also didn't achieve it. But that so-called failure was actually very productive, because that's what kept them moving. Here is the man, and I have the highest admiration for someone like him. Really, I mean, you know, a life devoted to a quest to achieve perfection. Here he is, you know, working with his own hands again, not just drawing, you know, with a Tsquare or not, but also using the tools to. He was not a manufacturer, but look at him. There are pieces of wood under the table, and maybe he works in his living room or something. And you see his trousers, you know, his pants. On the right side there is a spot, some dust on it. It's okay. He's like a kid, like a child who is, you know, absorbed by his passion. The king of chairs, Hans Wegner. The king of chairs, you see, he works also. He has a Tsquare there, and the rectangle, and the ruler, and the glasses, and the cigarette, as a true creator who is consumed by his passion Fine. I like his shoes. I like his pants, which are a little bit shorter. It's fine. Here again, contemplating a chair. This is inspiring. A man who is totally into what he's doing. He's devoured by passion. And when you are like this, you know, you even forget to eat. Einstein was totally right when he said we don't really need, you know, comfort on all kinds of, you know, gadgets or facilities. He didn't quite use these words, but in essence he said we only need something to be enthusiastic about. And Hans Wegner was enthusiastic about chairs. So he didn't need a car, a house, you know, possessions. It was his love of chairs and designing chairs that kept him going. And, you know, coming back to us, because all these examples, that is Charlemagne or Hans Wegner, they are relevant only in as much as they touch upon our lives. So what is the example? Passion. To love something. If you love something and you work in that field towards that something, you are very rich. The Street at Wegner's Childhood from 1915. I don't know if in Copenhagen or not, but he was Danish. Wegner's child home left in present day. Indeed, a Danish street. You know, at that time you entered the house straight into the house, you know, from the street, from the sidewalk. Look, with 2 steps, you open the door and you were probably even in the living room. It's okay. Something like this would be inconceivable today, especially in our country. No way. You know, it's not healthy. It's not functional. Anyway. Hans Wegner, I love this picture. This is one of the best pictures I ever saw in general. Look at this. He's here. This is Hans Wegner. And these are his co-workers. You know, he didn't go to university to study. This man was since an early age working with being an apprentice in, you know, manufacturing. Look at the expression of his colleague here. It's something beautiful about, and these are, you know, more, you know, cocky colleagues, but they feel the way this man is, you know, kind of, you know, probably bothering a little bit Hans Wegner through affection. But you can tell that Hans Wegner is on his way to stardom somehow. I don't know. I love this picture. Of course, I fantasize, but it's a nice picture because it's very human. Okay, now workshop, that's where he worked, his workshop in 1905. This is how the workshop was in 1905. Well, Wegner worked later there, but you know, it was a workshop, but also, you know, probably they lived here, and there was a showroom. You see here some children staring at the photographer, because in 1905 it wasn't such a common sight to see someone taking pictures. A chair for Nyborg Public Library, done by an early work by Hans Wegner. He was not at all a man to ignore tradition. In fact, he even inspired himself from various traditions, even from the Far East, from China. Children, I only show you know, chairs, one chair at a time from his activity, and then, you know, maybe at a later time, not today, we'll go into detail about maybe a few chairs. He was truly, he was not a speculative designer who wanted to create the new without a serious consideration. He didn't do extravagant chairs, although a few of them are kind of interesting. He was a man immersed in tradition and crafted very well whatever he was working on. All these chairs were done by him. Fountain and sitting at Aarhus City Hall. I don't know about that fountain. I wish it wasn't him who designed it. Anyway, but the benches seem to be okay. Another lounge chair. This one I love. I think it's brilliant. You know, it's interesting aesthetically. It's almost like a sculpture, and you can also sit on it and probably comfortably. He used very good materials, very light wood, but strong wood like teak. I actually, in New York, I found once a chair by Hans Wegner. Maybe that's why this is in part my affection for him. I found a chair which was discarded and on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Someone threw away a chair that was by him, by Hans Wegner. It was signed in the interior. Of course, I took it. I gave it to my daughter, and then when she moved, unfortunately, she got rid of it. And this is a pain that will never cure in my soul. But I had my hands on a Hans Wegner chair, extremely lightweight, and the wood being teak. It was because of the wood, the frame, and extremely comfortable. The one I found had the seat was a little bit eroded, the textile, the fabric, but that could have been replaced. Otherwise, it was in a perfect condition. Such a chair usually goes, you can find them on eBay with $1,000 to $1,500, one chair. They're expensive, designed for Fritz Hansen. In fact, I hope I have in this presentation the chair or one very close to the one I told you I found. And I was very proud of, and I'm so unhappy that my daughter threw it away. Anyway, the Wishbone Chair, everything here is designed, you know, everything is very carefully thought out. The round chair, I don't know if this is not the president's chair. There is a chair that he designed that some presidents of the United States, and maybe not only of the United States, sat in. The logo represented an H and a W for Hans Wegner. Yeah, here there was a stamp, the logo on some, which sometimes represented the conjunction between the manufacturer and the designer, adherence to traditional craftsmanship. Wegner said of his work, "I have always wanted to make unexceptional things of an unexceptionally high quality." I love the way he puts it, you know, with that Scandinavian reticence. Unexceptional things of an exceptionally high quality. This is a very good wording that he chose. How would a building be an unexceptional building, but of an exceptionally high quality? That would be an interesting challenge. Many of Wegner's wooden chairs are characterized by traditional joinery techniques, including mortise and tenons, finger joints, and sculpted elements such as armrests and seat supports. In the early models of the round chair, Wegner used a mortise and tenon, I'm not sure I pronounce well these words, sorry, joint to connect the arms at the middle of the backrest. Wegner was dissatisfied with the way that this looked and wrapped the backrest in cane to hide what he considered to be an unsightly design. Unhappy with this compromise and the deceptive illusion that the arms and backrest were constructed from a single piece of wood, Wegner later updated the design to use a zigzag pattern finger joint to connect the three parts. In the Peacock Chair, the connection of the legs, sorry, the text is a little bit long, but we'll arrive at the pictures. The connection of the legs to the seat is accentuated by the use of a darker wood wedge in the mortise and tenon joint. These features emphasize the process involved in bringing the furniture together and help inform the user of the craftsmanship employed in his work. So in a way, he was searching for the same thing. Again, almost unavoidably, I come back to Louis Kahn, because Louis Kahn was attempting to make buildings where also the viewer or the user, passerby would understand how the building came together, how it was built. And it seems that also Hans Wegner, at the level of designing chairs, was trying the same thing. To make the people around that chair or using that chair understand the craftsmanship that was employed. In addition to an adherence to traditional craftsmanship, many of Wegner's pieces also paid homage to historical and traditional chairs. This can be seen in Peacock Chair, which is based on a classic Windsor chair, and the Chinese chair series, which was inspired by Ming Dynasty chair design. Wegner described his approaches, stripping the old chairs of their outer style and letting them appear in their pure construction. Maybe here there is also a suggestion for us in architecture. That's why I think it's very, very important to know a lot about what preceded us, because then you are informed and you can get inspired by either the architecture during Charlemagne's time or Alberti's time or Mackintosh's time. It's important to know. Then you feel less alone and you feel more inspired. Notable creations: rocking chair. It is crafted very well. The image is traditional, but the connoisseur, and I'm not an expert, but the experts say that there are very discrete deviations from the traditional model. He truly tried to perfect a model. The Chinese chair, the China chair series was inspired by a portrait of Danish merchants sitting in traditional Ming chairs. The first, produced by Fritz Hansen, is the closest to its source material. The back splat is sculpted into the arm rail, which terminates in a decorative curved finial. A very elegant chair. We have to recognize, yeah. I mean, look, everything is studied. Everything. There is no more, no less. It's an elegant piece of furniture. And they look good also together. Two chairs, sure. You can even put a third one there. And look at the, these details. If everything collaborates to the whole, and it's functional, it's solid, it's lightweight, it's comfortable. It's everything. Another China chair. He made small variations, just as Brunkush made of his birds in flight. Here, Hans Wegner made of his of this model. He tried to achieve truly the ultimate, in this case, Chinese chair. The Peacock Chair was inspired by traditional Windsor chair. Wegner exaggerated the archback, creating a high-backed yet airy chair. The back spindles are flattened in the approximate area of a person's shoulder blades, the visual result of which evokes a bird's tail plumage. That's why it is called the Peacock Chair. You remember, I keep saying it, what John Ruskin said, that in nature, what is the most beautiful is the most useless. And he gave us an example, the peacock's tail. Maybe Hans Wegner would have agreed with it. I don't know. They are inspiring. This represents Wegner's design philosophy of continuous purification, to cut down to the simplest possible elements of four legs, a seat, and a combined top rail and armrest. It rose to prominence in the 1960 televised debate between Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy. Both presidential candidates sat in the chair during the debate. So this is the chair, the president's chair, as sometimes it is called, the round chair. Here it is. Now, I don't know, maybe it needs a pillow or maybe not, but the frame is yeah, it has some kind of, so this is the president's chair. Very well crafted. Now, the modern Danish design from mid-century is magnificent in general. Here he is, John F. Kennedy sitting on Wegner's chair with very shiny shoes. And the other chair, waiting for Nixon. Well, there are two more chairs like that. Anyway, the folding chair, lightweight with a cane seat. This was interesting. Wegner created a hook so the chair could be hung on the wall to save space. I love these chairs, and you'll see you can either hang it on the wall or attach it to a wall, and yes, of course this is done indeed with great materials and great craftsmanship. Who cares that there are small, because of the passage of time? It's fine. This weaving is done manually and, is impressive. High quality wood. And here it is, hanging on the wall. A stool also. You see, that's how the stamp was on the chairs, and it told one where it was made in either in Copenhagen, or there were other locations for the manufacturers in Denmark, and with a symbol that also stood for Hans Wegner. Made in Denmark, Copenhagen. High respect for craftsmanship, for materials, for the user, because they were not just aesthetical, games. This now they were made to be functional, but as it was said at the beginning, organic functionality, and with a great respect for what the chair was made for. Wishbone Chair was the first collaboration between Wegner and maker Carl Hansen. Began a series of chairs inspired by a portrait. Oh, I read this already. We saw this chair already. A very lightweight, and this is remarkable, that a very lightweight chair, very, very strongly built. The Flagyard Chair often drew from historical forms. He also created forms without precedent. The Flagyard Chair was inspired by a trip to the beach, during which Wegner carved out the form in the sand. The metal rope and sheepskin chair is an unusual but not unprecedented break from Wegner's prolific use of wood. A very innovative chair, this one. Almost futuristic, almost science fiction. So he was able also to create whimsical chairs, very innovative, but very well crafted as well. Papa Bear Chair, an upholstered armchair with exposed wood handrests that evokes a bear's pose. I don't know, this is a little bit, it almost seems as if it's not by him, but it was by him. Anyway, this one personally I don't like so much, but it's not for me to say. It's So Horse Easy Chair. Valet chair. This is interesting because you can also hang your suit or your coat on the back of the chair. And it has three legs. It even opens up like this. So it's an interesting piece of furniture. Organic functionality. All solid wood, of course. He was an artist. I mean, he was a maker, a craftsman, but probably, as Walter Gropius would have said, an exalted craftsman. This office chair inspired by a doctor critique of how Danish furniture ignore ergonomics. I don't know. I mean, here there is metal and wood, and for my taste, it's a little bit impure. He was searching for purity, but here he got influenced by critics' comments on lack of ergonomics. Anyway, an attempt, an experiment. Some experiments work, some experiments don't. Ox chair, which came with or without horns, showed the less serious side of Wegner's designs. Let's see. Yes, he was playful. Sometimes he played, and sometimes maybe a little bit dubiously, but it's okay. It's okay. He designs 500 chairs, so you know, a few are whimsical. It was only in production for a short time due to consumers' discomfort with the edgy design from 1990s. Circle chair, original design 1965 with a steel tube base went into production with a base made entirely in wood in 1985. I like more his earlier works, but anyway, that's it. So happy birthday, Hans Wegner. And now we go to the only architect actually today, an interesting Japanese architect, Kazuo Shinohara. I actually attended a lecture by Shinohara in New York at Columbia University when he was invited by Bernard Tschumi to give a lecture. I thought it was around 1992, 1993. So he died in 2006. He was a professor of architecture in Tokyo, and he built some houses, very interesting houses. He seemed to be against Western influences on Japanese domestic architecture, although he was a very knowledgeable man about Western architecture. And although he remained immersed in the traditions of his country, he was also an innovator. And as such, he was not indifferent to what was happening in Europe or the United States and so on. He received the Golden Lion for his lifetime achievement at the Venice Biennial. So a very recognized man, and his work should be known. So Kazuo Shinohara, born April 2nd in 1925, was a Japanese architect forming what is now widely known as the Shinohara School, which has been linked to the works of Toyo Ito, Kazunari Sakamoto, and Itsuko Hasegawa. About Itsuko Hasegawa, I have already a PowerPoint presentation. I also saw her lecturing in New York, an interesting architect, a woman, a lady. And I don't know about Kazuno Sakamoto, but one thing is for sure. Japan continues to provoke us with its architecture. And my question is why? Why is it that Japan has the most numbers of Pritzker Prize laureates? Obviously, something good is happening in that country. It's the hard work. Yes, the Japanese work very hard, but it's more than that. Their curiosity, their imagination, they want to challenge themselves, and they try to achieve perfection. They work exquisitely. Even now, anything made in Japan is beautifully made. And I think they are a lesson to the whole world. So a key figure who explicitly rejected Western influences, yet appears on almost every branch of the family tree of contemporary Japanese architecture, is Kazuo Shinohara. His effects on the discipline as a theorist, designer, and teacher have been immense. And my call to my suggestion, my advice, if you want, to the students in architecture, are to not neglect theory, because in architecture, you cannot just be a maker of a building without the thinking that the making of a building requires. That's why the important architects also, they were not theoreticians per se, although some were, but they wrote, they published, they wrote essays, they wrote manifestos. Architecture is an intellectual activity. It involves the whole of yourself. So it's not just about knowing how to build a building. It's also about knowing why you are building the building, not just how. That why is a very important question. And in general, the Japanese architects are also philosophers. The best of them, if you read in the Japan Architect or A+U or other, or in books, in the books they published, you see that the Japanese architects are not just makers. They are good at making, but they're also philosophers. They are conceptual artists, and sometimes very esoteric. So he studied at Tokyo Institute of Technology, TIT, finishing in 1953. So at 28 he finished. It was the war in the meantime, and going on to become professor in 1970. He established his own practice in 1954, going on to design more than 30 residential buildings, as well as many key public buildings across Japan. His work is generally classified as having strong qualities of lucidity and ephemerality, and for these reasons is often seen as ideologically influential on Toyo Ito's work. He was awarded the Architectural Institute of Japan's Grand Prize in 2005. In 2010, the biennial in Venice, the Biennale di Venezia, awarded a special commemorative Golden Lion in memory of Kazuo Shinohara, an accomplished architect. So here he is. He was actually, what is not said here, he initially studied mathematics. And this was very important. He was a mathematician who then turned to architecture. But his concern with mathematics, I think, is very important when you consider his work. And I think he was also good looking, if I'm allowed such a frivolous statement. An interesting man. And Japan has many interesting men and many interesting architects. And again, the question is why? Why are they so special? Because it's very rare to come across an architect who doesn't have an interest in Japanese architecture. Japanese architecture somehow still fascinates almost anyone. And the question is why? There must be something, and I think we can learn from them. I mean, what do we see here? We see a serious professor, mature professor at the Tokyo University, an accomplished architect with a kind of a Lego, construction, staring at it, maybe not quite like a kid, but I wonder how many architects at his age would photograph themselves or would allow to be photographed with such a, in a way, unserious construction. But he understood that play is part of creativity. You have to be playful. You have to be childlike. Look at him here. It's almost a contradiction between his posture, his face. We clearly see the face of a thinker, maybe an intense thinker, a Hamletian nature maybe. And then you look at this Lego, and you say, what's going on here? What is he staring so seriously at? Well, that's exactly it. God himself, I think, was a child when he played with the creation. And he created the world with that innocence and, inventiveness that the child has. And this is what Shinohara seems to, in a way he stares, I think, at his own innocence, because you can tell this is a man, a mature man, a serious man, but what we see in front of him is about playing. A thinker and a player, Kugayama house from 1954. So this was the year when he opened his practice. This is the first house that he built. And it's an interesting house, kind of similar to the house that Kenzo Tange built for himself. Kenzo Tange actually built only one family house for himself all his life. This is the house that Shinohara built, and it's you know, very connected with tradition, but it's also modern. And you'll see later that he built some whimsical houses and very interesting. But this one, you know, he was, how old was he? He was born in 1925. So he was 29 years old when he built this house, 1 year after he finished his studies. I found an article on the web where, you know, this period in Japan was a period of great activity. Japan was trying to, you know, come back to life after the terrible tragedy of the Second World War, the 2 atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And Japan understood that in order to return to life, it needed great devotion, intense devotion to, you know, work first, and then technology and creativity. And yes, the country came back to life brilliantly, actually. And not just in architecture, of course. But we see here already in this house, we look at this stair, and this stair would not be accepted in most schools of architecture. It doesn't have a handrail. Maybe the angle is not the correct one. Maybe it is not an easy to use, very easy to use. But, you know, how come the Japanese can use it and we can't use it, you know? And it's a good looking stair. And, you know, this obsession with maximum comfort, I think is a little bit tiring and not very productive. You will see even today, Fujimoto uses stairs which would be totally inconceivable in many countries, and certainly in many schools of architecture. How come the Japanese, who are very sophisticated and very up to date in many fields, are not disturbed by this? Maybe it's not so important. Maybe we should reconsider our obsessions. You know, I mean, why should the stair be necessarily minimum 90 centimeters wide? Why couldn't it be 60 centimeters, like maybe this one is? You know? And anyway. So what we see here is the first floor and the top floor, and it's, I don't know what to say. Now the top floor is this one, with a broken line, and it's a house that is rather traditional, but and it has parts which would be difficult for other people to accept. You know, like to enter here directly into the kitchen and the dining area, and it's almost like it's not a living room because the living room is upstairs. But once you get rid of some of the dogmas, you can do a house very freely and very imaginatively and working quite well. Of course, they also had tatami rooms, which we don't have in Europe. This was a tatami, although usually the tatami is not square. He used a square tatami room, which is rather unusual. But the plan is very simple, you know, literally. The ground floor, kitchen with an eating area and the stair. And then upstairs you have a bathroom, the bedroom, and it looks like a living room here. And the tatami. I don't know what this is here. Maybe some kind of a storage, or that's it. Also interesting in Japan, in traditional houses, they didn't have bedrooms in some houses. They just had the closets with with you know, the beds, twin size beds, were inside the closets, and underneath the bed was a storage space for the, you know, the belongings to the bed. And it's fine, you know, it could work. I'm very moved by some of these traditional ways of living, where you don't have a special room with a huge bed, you know, king size or queen size, occupying half of the room in the center and so on. There are other ways, more economical and maybe even more, you know, pleasing. It can be experimented. But he was still an architect, an educated architect who used, you know, there is a bedroom here, but there are no corridors. You know, there is no corridor. It's just open spaces. So it's still an economical house. The umbrella house from 1961. Here, the umbrella is for all to see. A very simple house, actually, but architecturally interesting. From the outside, you say nothing exceptional. You know, it's just a traditional house with a sloping roof. But look at the sloping roof inside. And talking about stairs, look at this. You know, why not have this kind of ladder, you know, in you know, contemporary buildings, houses is possible. You know, why not? You can move it around. You can even hide it from being seen. You can. It depends. You know, it offers you freedom as opposed to a monumental solid stair, which is, you know, 90 centimeters, if not 1 meter wide, or 1 meter and 20 centimeters wide. You know, as if you spend all your life on that stair. And okay, you know, someone might say, well, why should I risk falling from the stair? Well, be careful, no? You just try to be careful, that's it. Now look at the plan of the house. Again, the tatami room is big, and, you know, it's a special room in Japan. Otherwise, again, no corridors, no, you know, it's a simple room, essentially. Now, I don't know where the stair goes because there is no floor there. I guess there is something here, but even that is very possible. You know, I think if we get rid of some of our dogmas, we can build very interesting houses that also are economical because they don't eat up a lot of space. No furniture, right? Almost no furniture. A little table where you actually sit on the floor. You might say, wait a minute, I am civilized. I am not going to sit on the floor. Are we trying to say that the Japanese are not civilized? I mean, and it works, actually. You just imagine that you get rid of all the need for all those chairs, you know, around the table with 6 people, 6 chairs, if not 8, if not 12. God, you know, it eats up the whole space. Here there is a lot of space, but the house is so small. And it's also, you know, almost a piece of art. It's a creation of Kazuo Shinohara, an important Japanese architect. So there is more to architecture than just those conventions that we work with, you know, coming from Ernest Neufert or who knows who else. Actually, the rural architecture of the world. Look, the entrance is right into the large space. This is the entrance into the house. No vestibule, no hallway, no nothing. You just enter. It's okay. It's fine. House with an earthen floor. He even made one, and you will see there are some interesting things that you are going to see now. So this is called. He seemed to have an interest in houses with earthen floors. Now here is not so obvious as in other houses. here you can still see the connection with the traditional Japan. You know, I mean, you look at this picture and you say this is Japan, and Japan it is indeed. No chairs, no heavy pieces of furniture, just a clean space that is interestingly structured and aesthetically pleasing. And the Japanese lived quite well. The outside, you would say, the most banal building. Yes, it is banal, so-called banal, but uh, maybe there is some wisdom in this banality, so-called banality. The sliding doors are also interesting. You know, we have this culture of doors, you know, but the sliding panels and sliding doors have virtues which the door does not have. You say nothing impressive here. It's true. It doesn't look like a so-called impressive house. But the interior space has a richness and a sensitivity that is not to be ignored. North House in Hanayama, 1965, is becoming slowly more and more experimental. And although he keeps close to the archetypal model. House in White, 1966. I also like the naming of some of his houses. You know, like a house in white. We don't name our buildings in this way, but maybe if we can find more poetical ways of naming our buildings, it wouldn't be a bad thing at all. Because maybe the Latins were right. Nomen est omen. The name is destiny. If you name a building, a house, in a certain way, it's possible that you already give birth to its destiny in a certain way. So why not give names to buildings in a poetical, metaphorical way? I remember a great film, truly a great film by Akira Kurosawa, The Bodyguard, and if you didn't see it, I recommend it to you greatly. It's a great film by a great director and with a great actor, Toshiro Mifune. I don't know a lot about actors, but Toshiro Mifune is unbelievable. And he was a samurai in this film. And at one moment, someone asked him, "What is your name?" And he looks through the window and he sees a field of flowers and he says, "I am the field of," and he names those flowers that he was looking at. And I find this very beautiful. You know, he didn't have a name. He was a lost samurai because the lords he was serving were not in his society in his time any longer. But he named himself with what he saw through the window then. And actually the Japanese, this is very common and was very common in the 19th century. The greatest Japanese artists, they changed their names many times. Like Hokusai changed his name many times, and most artists, they didn't stick to one name. And this is interesting, you know, and I wonder why we shouldn't change our names depending on, I don't know, it is spring now, so let me call myself, I don't know, the singing bird, or something like this. You know, we are so stiff, you know. Anyway, So a house on, this is interesting, a house of earth, 1966. Look at this section and the plan. So the bedroom is actually all the way underground. It doesn't have windows. It's just, you know, an underground room. And this is the house. And it's just the stair which connects the living space with a sleeping space. Not that sleeping is not also living. Of course it is. But it's kind of interesting. Why not? You know, just for the night, except to, you don't need actually too much. I don't know how he ventilates this space, but that's how he built it. Now already here there is the assault of objects. You know, I don't know if the influence is just from Europe, but this is not any longer that pure aired space that we saw at the beginning. Now there is an accumulation of vases and bibelots, or how are they called, and books and artworks and lamps and you name it. Maybe the owner was some kind of a collector. But look again at this stair, which goes to this area, which could be used as a, you know, a sleeping area also. It's fine. And the stair which goes down to the windowless bedroom, entering directly from the courtyard is fine. And here they are, you know, the bedroom and the living room. Well, there are two plans here. Okay, moving forward with other houses by Shinohara. And I really like these movable ladders, you know. They're even nice aesthetically. They express something about mobility in a, I don't know, in a less pretentious way than a fixed stair and so on. It could be used or it could not be used. It's fine. It's fine. And using it, you become a child again. Of course, you could risk a little bit of falling, but if you are careful, you are not going to fall. And plus, there's nothing wrong to become a child again, from time to time at least. It's fine. The Japanese use all the time that kind of stair, of ladder. And look at the bedroom, you know, underground is literally reduced to a minimum. Okay, the uncompleted house from 1970. This one is more complex, and this one has something interesting. Two stairs. You are going to see the plan. In fact, you are seeing them here. I have even other plans. This is the perspectival drawing. Interesting with the two stairs. Look at the section here, and again, the plans. Very interesting. I mean, they deserve to be studied. You know, because it's not very common to have a house with two stairs in this way. With two stairs, there are, of course, other houses, but in this way, going in the same direction, I don't know if there is another one like it. I don't know why it is called uncompleted. To me, it looks completed. Now this tree doesn't seem to be completed. I mean, it was cut down, I think. Anyway, the Prism house from 1974. Here he shows that he was a student of mathematics. And it has an interesting interior. As a diagram, maybe it doesn't seem so interesting, Of course, the functionalist would ask, what is happening here? The professor would circle this with red and would say, wait a minute, you cannot do this. We are supposed to use everything, every square inch, every square centimeter. This is unacceptable. What is happening here? And what is happening here? No way. But what about the purity of the concept, so to speak, Professor? I mean, you know, that doesn't count at all. And look, someone seems to be happy here in this the proximity of this sloping. Kind of turn off the microphone. Thank you. Unless you want to say something. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Thank you. So, you know, a house with walls which are not vertical, some might say it's difficult to use them. Well, do we use all the walls in our houses continuously or no? And I'm sorry, I have to. Okay, I'm sorry about this, but I had to turn off that microphone. So we continue. I also think a house benefits from being engaging visually, provocative, inspiring. And the triangle is a dynamic geometrical figure. Yes, the roof is not vertical, there is a sloping plane here, but it's okay. I think it's okay. And yes, it's a prism house. Maybe it's too pure for those who are concerned with the functionality. But I also think the conceptual interest of a house that is innovative has its own importance, and we shouldn't relegate such a building to rejection. Yeah, you might not use, although, even such a wall, which is actually a roof, can be used. And it's okay. We don't have to use every single inch and square, centimeter of the house. Tanikawa house from 1974. Now here, what do we see? Look at the floor. It's actually the earth. The earth is within the building and sloping also. Yes, I understood the building was built for an avant-garde poet who agreed to build this. And the question is why? We see a hammock here between these two interesting columns that are kind of tree-like, abstracted trees in a way. And what would make one with a room filled? I mean, having the earth outside of the house extend or enter inside the house. Why not? Yes, it's extravagant, yes, because in a way the house is the negation of what is outside of it. But in some cases, for an extravagant poet, I guess it works. It's a way of bringing the outside in, literally, maybe too literally. Even the tree, this is not a tree per se, but it's the abstraction of a tree which he brought from outside in. And, I think there are valuable things here. They're unconventional, yes, but, I think that the kind of thinking that Kazuo Shinohara had has elements in it that could inspire people outside of Japan as well, and is actually happening this. Now look at this stair here. Look at the angle, right? Well, Neufeld would cry out, would say, no way. Why not? You know, why not? Yes, it's a little bit of an adventure. Yes, it's a little bit of an effort, but it works, and it's not. I don't think it's a crime to make a stair which is done in this way. I think it's okay. And obviously Shinohara thought so too, and many other Japanese think so too. If the angle would have been the correct one, it would have been like this, eating up a lot of space and so on, and it wasn't necessary, really, not for this house. The house is interesting. It's from the outside it is archetypal, is paradigmatic, is nothing, maybe nothing exceptional seen from the outside. But this room is exceptional. Where the sloping land is actually entering the house, crossing it even. Recently, Shigami built a large pavilion, if I am to call it so, kind of in this spirit. And even Kazuyo Sejima with her Rolex large building in Switzerland. So, what Shinohara did was not, didn't remain like an isolated experiment. But this is at a much smaller scale than the examples I just gave. Innovation can happen in many ways, even with small things. Like if you are to design a small house, you can design it in so many ways, and you can be very creative, even if you don't actually apparently break the mold, so to speak, or break the rules. Although he did break the rules in this particular room, yes, of course, because he also had a special client, the poet. And since the poets are considered to be crazy, especially the avant-garde poets, all for the better. It's how many rooms or spaces in the houses all over the world are like this one? This is a space for a dreamer, of course, with a hammock and the so-called floor being sloping and with earth, and look at these supporting elements which are sculptural and a little bit abstractions of trees, and all of a sudden this space became surreal and special. But isn't imagination important? If you are in this hammock, you can give birth to yourself again, so to speak. The dreamer in you, that is. Uehara house from 1976. This one is also an interesting house and a beautiful tree. This is the house with darkening concrete. So you see, he experimented in many ways with his houses. You look at the house on the right, look at the house on the left, and then you see in between this house by Kazuo Shinohara, which is so very different. The section. As you know, the Japanese are very, very attentive at details, and they even the smallest detail receives a lot of attention. The house is primal, is almost primitive, but I look at it and I almost see a face here because, of course, of these two so-called eyes. There is a bedroom here, I think, with two windows. So this is the plan. It's not so small as you might think. It's not, but it's still a small house. But look at this. Inside the house, to have such a sculpture monumental element. And obviously he liked this shape, you know, almost like a trunk with two massive branches. It structures the house powerfully. Again, the functionalist would say, wait a minute, when I pass by, I could hit myself with my head on this thing here if I'm not careful. Well, be careful. What can we say? Be careful. And if you are not careful, you hit yourself once and the second time will not happen, because the first experience would be painful enough to preclude you from repeating it. Again, we see the ladder here, the stair, which is at an unacceptable angle for Mr. Ernest Neufert and other lovers of great comfort. Yes, there is some discomfort here. You look here, yes, you have to lower yourself even if you are not very tall. But who knows? Sometimes maybe even discomfort could be beneficial. Why is it that Japan has such a high longevity? People in Japan live the longest. There must be a reason for this, and their life was not easy, and they had a terrible Second World War, and you know, they have earthquakes, they have tsunamis, they have even nuclear disasters, and still they live the longest. Why is it so? And as I said at the beginning, they have the biggest number of Pritzker laureates in the world in architecture, yes. So I guess this was during construction. An unusual house, no doubt. But maybe a house is more than a house. Maybe a house is also related to some kind of a temple. In other words, the psychological or spiritual dimension of a house is to be considered as well, not just functionalism in a strict sense. Maybe these concrete parts of the house have a more subtle function that we are not aware of, but which is not at all without importance. All of a sudden, a rather small house becomes engaging and surprising, and it reveals itself as a complexity artistically, in spatially, architectural. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. Oh. So, and look at these two windows. You know, just two round windows. They are not, nothing more than that. But somehow they are the distinctive feature in the house, and they make me think. They make me ask questions. They make me wonder. The house in Ashitaka, 1977. This one is very different. This picture, which is impressive, but I think it took place, it was taken during the construction. From the outside, it looks like a, almost traditional house. Almost. With this one, I'm not very sure what happened, because I see the plans and they seem to be different from what the pictures actually show. Unfortunately, the resolution is not great, but you can still see here some functions. It's not just an open large space. All the pictures I saw are with a large open space. So I don't know exactly what is happening here. This is the model of the house, another view. This is interesting though, it's mysterious and you don't know exactly what is going on there. There are reflections, or sometimes the pictures might not represent reality. They might be doctored, so to speak, I don't know. Or maybe it's taken through a window where there are reflections. I don't know, but it's a nice picture. Because the metaphysical side of architecture is present. And I think the metaphysical side of architecture is very, very important. And most of the time, I'm afraid we ignore it. House under high voltage lines. Again, an interesting naming for the house. And it is indeed under some high voltage lines. You see them here. And the house is, I don't understand it very well. It has some curves which are rather mysterious for me. This drawing is too abstract and too minimal. The plan itself rather schematic, and another plan. We'll see pictures of it, and maybe you'll decipher some of its complexities easier. It's an interesting house because it, on one hand, is modern, but on the other hand, is traditional. So it has a certain duality. Turning its back on the high voltage lines through the roof. And here is the bedroom. An interesting roofing. A well-made stair, this time a real stair, helicoidal stair, that might have made some great builders of helicoidal stairs envious. Now, I don't know about those round columns, very massive. They are a little bit postmodern, so to speak, but that's when he lived. Here too. There are whimsical parts in his work, and you'll see also in his public buildings that are, they need some knowledge about the building in order to truly evaluate them and understand them. There is this is a website where you can read about this house more. I didn't want to reproduce the text. It was a rather long text, but for those of you who might want to read about it, this is, for example, a site where a lot of information about it is found. Okay, and now a house in Yokohama, 1985. This one also has some interesting parts and unexpected. You'll see a cylinder room. This is, Japanese aesthetics in a way, very uninhibited and uninhibiting. Some might say, it's formalism here. Look at this door here. and what's going on here, is there are some steps, but going nowhere. And there is a door, I guess you open and you just sit on these steps in the sunlight, maybe. I don't know if he designed also the furniture. Maybe yes, maybe not. I don't know. But look at this room. It's interesting. It's playful. It's theatrical. And look towards the outside. You have a door there, but there are no steps. It's okay. It's not such a big distance. You can use it. You can climb on it like a toddler. Again, being childlike, it's fine. The stubborn old house, and then the more playful house by Kazuo Shinohara. Now, the Japan Ukiyo-e Museum in Matsumoto, I don't know if you know about Ukiyo-e. Ukiyo-e is called, in translation, is the floating world. And it represents the beautiful art, graphic art that Japan generated from the mid 18th century to the middle of the 19th century. The woodcuts, the Japanese woodcuts, which were magnificent, were beautiful, and they had great artists who expressed themselves through these wooden, woodcuts, engravings that used wood to incise and then to print on paper. And these woodcuts, the beautiful woodcuts, Japanese woodcuts, are part of this artistic movement specific to Japan called ukiyo-e, the floating world. Frank Lloyd Wright, for example, had a great collection of woodcuts, Japanese woodcuts. He also had great admiration for Japan, for the Japanese culture. Sometimes I read when he didn't have money, he would pay his employees with woodcuts. He also lost a lot of woodcuts in a fire in Taliesin East, where 2 times he was punished by the gods of fire, and in one of them he even lost the woman he loved. They were not married, but they were in love and living together with her 2 sons, not his sons, but her sons. Anyway, ukiyo-e, and you will see, I mean, Kazuyo Seijima built a museum for Hokusai. There were other great artists, truly magnificent, these Japanese artists, and they didn't have the stiff understanding of what art or an artist is. For example, they used to hang the engravings, the woodcuts from the branches of the trees or the frames of the windows. And I read that apparently this great art form was discovered by the great European artists towards the end of the 19th century. When they had a little bit of money, they bought fish coming from Japan, and fish was wrapped in these engravings sometimes. And people like Monet, Degas, even Van Gogh, if he ever had money to buy Japanese fish, they discovered, the Japanese, they sent the fish to Europe, sometimes, not always, but sometimes covered, because they didn't have newspapers and there wasn't too much paper, in these great artworks. And that's when Europe became aware of the fascinating art of the woodcuts. Too bad I don't have here the pictures, but maybe one day I will make a presentation about them, about the ukiyo-e art, because it is truly magnificent. It is about the floating world, the ephemerality of the world. And it's something very beautiful, I think, about contemplating that so-called floating world. The museum is modern through and through. It is playful, it is capricious. Of course, the functionalist and the professor would ask, why is this here? You know, why a quarter of of a circle here? You know, what's the meaning of this? I don't think we have to explain everything, you know, and certainly not logically. It's also about, you know, it's a creation, you know, he felt like being playful in this way. So look, inside there is clearly a visual interest in what he did. And this light spirit is also present in the art itself, of the woodcuts of the ukiyo-e, the floating world. So this is how the building looks like as a whole, and I think it's fine. And again, you know, the functionalist and the professor would protest because they want logical and rational or rationalistic explanation for everything. You'll see other capricious things in that cannot be explained rationally, and it's fine. You know, here we see, this is a collage. In the background, we see a fragment of a woodcut by Hokusai, where it's supposed to be the sky. Now you see, and we'll see a detail of this, you know, which is again capricious, and but look at this, you know, you say what's going on here? My question is, what's going on here? Can we explain rationally why God made this tree taller and this one shorter, and you know, why certain things are in a certain way? Why human beings, one is shorter, one is taller, one is heavier, one thinner, one blonde hair, one black hair, you know? Do we have to justify everything? I like this window here, you know, it's playful, and maybe he could have been to articulate a certain logical answer, but I doubt it actually. It's the dialectics between a triangle and some curves, and I think it's okay. You see a reflection here, but I should have included some woodcuts, but maybe some of you know about this beautiful, truly original and beautiful art form from Japan, woodcuts from the ukiyo-e, the floating world. He was a mathematician, you see, he liked the triangles, but he also liked something else, which is, you know, this playfulness of the child. The Japan Ukiyo-e Museum, and here is a view from inside the museum before the pandemic. Tokyo Institute of Technology. We are approaching the end of the presentation. This is one of the last buildings he built. The Centennial Hall in Tokyo, 1987. Itself a playful and idiosyncratic building. Look at this. You know, certain things, again, might irritate the functionalist. But I do think a building, if it has cultural qualities, if it has a certain drama, is important. It helps. It helps because architecture is a visual art. You know, it engages. If a building is interesting, it attracts you. If a building is boring, it rejects you. So I don't know exactly what is the function of this thing. I imagine that it might have, but I don't know it. But danger is also part of architecture. And again, architecture is not just about comfort. It's not. Maybe I wouldn't go so far as Peter Eisenman went when he said that the great architecture is not the one that comforts you, but is one that torments you, or agitates you, or troubles you. I don't know if I would go so far, but I am tempted to think that architecture is not just about comfort. No, it could also be sometimes about discomfort. Yes. This obsession with comfort, I don't think, is arriving at the core of architecture. Now, here we have comfort, of course, but there is also discomfort of those cantilevered parts, cylindrical parts, protruding parts. You know, look at this. We saw in the plan how this looks like. It's spectacular from the outside. Maybe you don't like this spectacle. It's possible, but let's look back at the plan. Sorry. It's here. I have, I think, another plan, but you see with dotted line how that goes. Here it is. So the cantilever parts are here and here. So it's protruding this part of the building through the other one. As opposed to this building, this one says something. Maybe I don't know what it says, but it says something. This one is not saying anything. Look at this stair here, you know. I mean, why not? I don't know what's this. Sorry about this. Okay. And here it is, that stair that we saw, but from the outside. And now we arrive at, this might be the last building I show by him, the Kumamoto police station from 1990. This building is not truly my favorite by him, but and you even wonder, you know, why does the police building have to be so, you know, imposing and flamboyantly so? Although the facade has the reflections of the clouds, so it's not truly oppressing, but otherwise the building is rather. It's also symmetrical and, you know, with a level of exaltation, which I think it could be a little bit questionable in the case of a police station. I mean, really, does a police building need to be exalted? I'm not sure. Jean Nouvel also built police headquarters, I don't know, in Belgium, probably very, in my opinion, problematic because in his case, actually very dwarfing. This is not dwarfing, especially because of the glass, which reflects the sky and the clouds, but still, I don't know. It has a level of rhetorics that I would rather do without. And now this is the last building that I show today, the K2 building in Osaka from 1990. It's fine. I found some articles that it is a postmodern, good postmodern example. I don't see it as being postmodern, really. It's modern. It's a modernistic building. I don't know what its function is, but we see here again Shinohara, the former mathematician, working with diagonals and triangles, and you know, he seemed to like you know, the triangle. A public building, maybe some offices, I don't know. Thank you. And happy birthday, Kazuo Shinohara, and happy birthday, Charlemagne, and happy birthday, Hans Wegner.